Hi, I'm Aaron Brooker, your area Beck's agronomist covering Michigan and northern Indiana. In this video series, I'll discuss the PFR Proven products and practices and success strategies we've identified that I'm confident will work in Michigan. Join me as we bridge the gap and bring PFR to your farm. Last time we discussed one of our PFR Proven success strategies in corn, and today we're going to focus on a couple in beans. And these are going to be a couple things in PFR, again, with these success strategies that we've seen really high levels of success with. And so with soybeans, a couple of those are going to be planting date and then seeding rates. So I'll go ahead and show what the data says, especially here to start with on the planting date side of things. And this is something I do get a lot of pushback on, and I think it's because we focus more on the actual dates here in this study instead of focusing on the agronomic concepts that drive this yield. So when we look at soybean planting date, there's definitely a big advantage to planting early. So in this study, we've got basically each month is split up in half, starting with the second half of March and then going out into June. So our most profitable planting dates in this study have been those 2 April timings. So anytime we planted in April, that was the most profitable time to plant. However, when we see these dates, we think, well, that's pretty early to be planting in Michigan a lot of times, especially as we move north into Michigan. For some of you down south, this probably gets a little bit more normal for your planting dates. However, can be a little bit early, especially when we look at our historical planting dates. But what does the agronomy say behind this? Why does early planting work? So early planting really drives vegetative growth before we get to that flowering phase. Flowering is going to be determined by the day length or the length of night, and we don't really have a lot of control over that with anything that we do. That's pretty pre-programmed into these soybean maturities. So we want to drive as much vegetative growth, get these plants really nice and big, get as many nodes on there, because those nodes are where we're going to produce pods. So as many nodes as we can get, that's going to drive greater yield potential. And so that early planting date, that's really what that's doing, is giving us just that greater potential to drive yield. So when we think about planting dates in Michigan, maybe for you, especially if you're further north, we're not looking at planting in April. But if you're used to planting in that May 15th or May 20th range, maybe it's time to think about planting in the first part of May. Or if you're used to planting in the first part of May, maybe we could push that to early April or to late April. So what's more important? Is it planting date or making sure we plant into good conditions? Well, I'm still going to recommend that we make sure we have those good conditions for planting over just trying to get those beans in the ground early. We can't lose too much stand and still get optimal yields here. So the benefit of planting early really comes from planting into those good conditions if we get them early enough. What do I mean by good conditions? That's going to be optimal conditions right now. So nice soil moisture, usually ideal temperatures, although if we're not too wet, we can handle some cool temperatures. But also looking at that forecast. So what does the forecast say? Do we have a warming, drier trend? Or do we have a cooling trend? And especially a cooling trend with cold rain, with saturating rains, large rainfall events, that's where we can get into trouble. We want to make sure that we've got a nice warm forecast for these beans to get off to a nice start. So again, really don't focus on the dates for this data, but when we think about the agronomy behind it and why it works, early planting definitely is going to pay over those late planting dates. Now, I mentioned seeding rates as well as a PFR proven success strategy in soybeans, and this really drives at profitability on your farm. If you can use less seeds, then you're not paying as much for that seed, but if we can get similar yields and make more money, then that's a win-win. So what does our seeding rate study say? So we looked at everything from 100,000 all the way up to 175,000 in this study, and 100,000 was actually our most profitable seeding rate, planted into good conditions early in the season. Now, do I actually recommend planting 100,000 seeds per acre? Probably not in most cases. Usually, for Michigan growers, with some of the tough conditions we get, if we have ideal planting conditions, I'm probably going to recommend somewhere around that 125 to 130,000 range. This data is showing 15-inch rows. If you're in 30s, you might be around there or a little bit more. But if we get less than ideal conditions, or if we get into later planting dates, so if we're pushing out maybe into those late May planting dates and into early June, we do need to start bumping those rates up to make sure we've got enough plants out there, and again, driving enough nodes to produce those pods. Now, this data set that I'll show now shows the combination of planting date with seeding rates. So we have a range of seeding rates from 100,000 all the way up to 200,000 here, looking at a variety of seeding rates, and then 2 planting dates. So we've got an early planting date and a late planting date. And what this shows is that planting date drives yield probably more than our seeding rate. In terms of that profitability piece, we're going to make more money by early planting than worrying about our seeding rates. You can see every population planted early was better than every population planted late. And when it comes to early versus late planting and populations, I alluded to this already, but if we're planting early into good conditions, we've got great conditions for growth and getting that good vegetative growth, we can probably reduce those populations. Once we get into late planting conditions, we're probably going to need more plants out there to achieve those nodes to drive some yield. So again, a couple of PFR proven success strategies that really can drive a lot of profitability for your farm. Even though this data was not conducted in Michigan, there are a lot of agronomic concepts that still make sense for growers in our state. Please feel free to reach out if you have any other questions.